Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. My name is Christopher Clark. I'm a sales engineer at VMware. I work specifically on the Wavefront platform. So today we're going to go through a few slides, not too many. I don't want to commit murder by PowerPoint here. And then we're going to get right into a product demonstration. And like Caroline had mentioned, we're going to leave things open at the end for a little bit of Q&A. So jumping right in here, I just want to give a brief summary of what problem it is we're solving, where the market is today, things like that. So today in 2018, what we have is a rise of containers and microservices, right? So it's becoming very prevalent for a number of reasons, right? And they're all over the place. So with microservices and containers on the rise, this starts to become, we're seeing that more pushes to the code base are happening both in production and development multiple times a day, and many hands are kind of in the kitchen at that point. And what ends up happening here is it's a little bit fragmented, right? So you have all these microservices and containers and VMs and systems that you have to monitor, and this really creates a problem for DevOps. How do we monitor this? How do we make sure the application is running smoothly? And more importantly, how do we see issues and resolve those issues prior to us seeing it on Twitter or the customer calling the support line, right? So the answer to that is Wavefront. So Wavefront, what it allows you to really do is take time series data and load it into the Wavefront platform, and it then allows you to do things like see trends sooner, alert on anomalies earlier, and it also allows you to troubleshoot and iterate over these things with a much faster clip. And it's really easy for multiple people to use this because it's a SaaS-based application. You're not going to have to manage it. It's going to be all in browser. So business users, devs are going to be able to use this, as well as QA. Everybody's going to kind of get what they want out of it. On the business side of things, it's going to feel very intuitive and business oriented. And then on the development side of things, you can get as granular as you really want to with the power of our query language. You can, and just keep in mind that we're not just going to be able to monitor metrics out of applications. It's really anything that you want to monitor as long as you put it into a time series format, whether it be your application, your VM, an AWS VM, or any number of services. So how do we do this? It's really simple architecture from an implementation standpoint, right? There's three main steps to this. So on each application or system or container that you're wanting to monitor, you're going to install an agent, right? And I'll show you guys this a little bit later, but there's a one-line install that makes it super easy. But these agents are going to be responsible inside, whether, again, application or container, for collecting that time series data, those metrics that you want to monitor. And it's going to go ahead and get funneled into a proxy. From an architectural standpoint, I usually see one or two of these proxies, usually two, if for high availability sake. And the proxy's job is really what it sounds. It's going to aggregate all of this metric data from your agents, and it's going to funnel or proxy this information into Wavefront. And from once it's in Wavefront, it's going to be nearly immediately available to your business users, dev, QA, DevOps, whoever's trying to load that up. Now, I do want to make a couple special mentions here. You can also load things like logs via TCP or FileBeat. And if you're on some other SaaS platform like AWS, Google Cloud, or Pivotal, you can actually skip a lot of this implementation and load it directly into Wavefront right out of those services. So I'm not going to go over everything that you guys see here, but I do want you guys to keep in mind that we are very, very, very developer friendly. So what I mean by that is that we have a number of different integrations right out of the gate. So a few that are near and dear to my heart are going to be Apache Tomcat. We're going to have Slack for notifications, some message queuing, AWS, Linux, VMware, Kubernetes, Python, as well as a whole slew of other things here. So not only do we have all these integrations that are community and internal driven, but we also have some REST APIs that you can work with, as well as the web UI that you're gonna see here in a little bit. So I don't want to read everybody's quotes here. If you're interested, you can read these for yourselves. But we do have some customer testimonials from pretty big companies like Box, SpaceApe. We're also in the energy industry, and then we have one down there in the Fashion ID, Peak in Kloppenburg. So with that, guys, we're gonna get straight into the demo here, and again, we're gonna leave some time open at the end for a little bit of Q&A for what you guys are looking at. So the first thing I wanted to show you guys today is going to be a dashboard. So I mentioned that we have all this fragmentation with the clusters. How do we manage it? How do we excuse me? How do we really see all of the insights into what our application and containers are doing? So how we tackle this problem is by creating dashboards to really allow you to intelligently ask questions of the data and see what's going on. So right out of the gate, you guys can see here that's going to be very easy, both for the business user and the developer. Everything's going to be pretty intuitive, right? So we have the ability to alert on events. So right here we have a code deploy. You guys see that we have some performance degradation there on the deploy. Another very small feature that is hard to miss, but I like a lot, is how when we're going through all of these charts, you'll notice that we have the crosshairs. Those crosshairs are going to follow along with all the other charts. That way we don't lose any context as to what we're looking at. So another thing to mention here is if we want to drag and zoom into this area to see what exactly is happening, we can do so. And again, in kind of lockstep with what I was just mentioning, another one of my personal favorite features, it's very small, easy to miss, but very powerful, is these arrows. Once you find an area that you do want to look into a little more, we can go ahead and hit this arrow button. It syncs the rest of the charts into this area, so we don't have to go in and manually find that same spot, especially when we have a lot of data coming in like we're looking at here right now. So a few other pieces that I want to go over on this main dashboard is that we do have the ability to parameterize our queries. Now we are looking at a dashboard that's coming out of an AWS instance, so I can switch between my availability zones here. And we can even switch between production and development should we choose to. Now, you guys hear me say queries. We'll get into this here in a minute, but don't shy away when you hear queries. We have a query builder for the business users, and you even have a JavaScript-like query language for the more technical minded. In addition to being able to parameterize our queries, we can also group information as we see fit. So we can collapse our groups once we're done with them, or maybe we're just uninterested in them for the current moment. Along with the groups, we're going to automatically be able to switch between them by some jump links up here. So first, what we're looking at is some overall information about this AWS instance we were looking at. And maybe we want to go and not just look at the VM information, but we actually want to get some information out of the application server. Maybe we want to scroll down here to the database itself, or even see what's happening at the CPU level. So not only can we look at everything in aggregate at the dashboard level, but we can actually click into a chart and make some modifications here where we need to. So now that we have a little bit of context around what Wavefront is, how we solve the problem of monitoring our applications and containers and systems, let's run through a couple different use cases. So in this particular example, what we have are some artifacts in the data. And what I mean by that are we want to know when we have a service outage or something is an anomaly. But in this particular case, we have 5 different spikes in our requests, HTTP requests before noon. So typically what you might do if you're monitoring HTTP requests or any other system like this is you might say, okay, if it goes above or below a certain range, then let's go ahead and send me a Slack message or a text message, right? Well, I don't know about you guys, but if I get 5, 6 different notifications before the actual big one over here, I'm going to ignore them by the second one. So the first problem we have here is how do we get rid of the fake alerts, the things that resolve themselves pretty quickly? Well, down here we have this query builder. This allows me to do things like filter out information, which is what we're doing here on host, as well as apply different functions. So the first thing you might think is, okay, let's look at a moving window and we'll say moving average to try to get rid of some of these quick spikes. And it works okay-ish. So we'll actually increase this by 20 minutes, and you can see as I increase my time, as you would expect, it's going to go ahead and decrease some of these spikes. Now, the problem with this approach is you'll notice on my real event that I actually do need to be notified on, it kind of loses a little bit of that resolution into the actual problem. So that's why we can get rid of that function itself, come over back over to our moving window, and we will go ahead and use a moving median instead and use 10 minutes. And right out of the gate, it's going to say, okay, it looks great. I'm not getting any false alerts. I'm not getting what's called alert fatigue. I'm sure everybody here is familiar with it. If you get any sort of notifications, I mean, just even chat windows, right? And then what it leaves us with is, okay, this is really the event that we need to trigger an alert on. So let's say I take this and I need QA to look at my event. I'm saying there's a problem. What can we do about this? We can actually take this query, copy it over, remove my function. And this is, by the way, what it looked like before. Here's what we're looking at after. But let's go ahead and we can apply some more functions to this. So I mentioned alerting a couple times. Let's use a different chart for alert. So what we have here is a chart that we went into from the dashboard. We can actually come over here and create an alert right out of the same UI. Again, very low learning curve. Using that same query, what we're going to say is, okay, here's all this noise, but I really only want to see or be alerted on information that is above, let's say, 0.8. And you'll notice everything gets dropped to the wayside, and the only thing we're seeing is business as usual, and then spike. This is what we're going to alert on. So it's going to be very easy for everybody in your operational group to create these things. So moving on to another scenario here. So what we have here is a real customer use case. This use case, what happened was they came to us and said, we don't exactly know what's happening, but we have a bunch of network switches, and those network switches are having some problems, but we can't really identify what's happening. So can you help us get through some of this information and find what switch needs to be looked at? So we brought this to our engineering group, and they said, okay, so here's a little spoiler alert for everybody on the line. It's hard to notice. I've done this demo 1,000 times, so I already know that this is what we're looking for. But if you don't know that ahead of time, because of all the noise and the information, it's going to be hard to spot that anomaly, right? So the first thing our engineers actually did to help this real world customers, they said, okay, let's take all this information, let's do a little bit of a top bottom analysis, and it does exactly what it's supposed to do, but it doesn't prove anything because it's taking the top and bottom. The bad actor, the bad switch in this case, happens to be in the middle of the pack, so that really didn't do anything. So the next step our engineer did was, okay, well, let's do a standard deviation. Anybody that's on the line that's familiar with standard deviation, I'm not a math graduate by any means, but the basic concept is it's kind of like an average, but it looks for anomalies essentially, and that's what this does. Now, right there, we see the impact of those bad switches. We say, okay, here's what we need to look at. But the problem with the standard deviation is that once an anomaly occurs, it kind of becomes the new norm or impacts the baseline. So everything else is going to uptick a little bit. So our engineers went a little further beyond a standard deviation. And they said, well, why don't we do an IQR? So an IQR is similar to a standard deviation, except that it doesn't impact that baseline nearly as much. So as you guys can see here, we see all of everything's business as normal, but here's what we're looking at, and that immediately stands out. So they were able to take this chart by way of clicking our URL down here, send this back to them, and say, okay, this is what switch you need to be looking at. So a side note about this little URL, the short link that we're sending. Again, it's very small, unnoticed feature, but it's huge because if I send this URL, whether it's in a Jira or to a customer, they're not going to have to replicate anything that we're looking at here today. It's going to send them directly to this chart with these queries with all the information that we've applied to it. So you would think that, okay, this looks good, but how do we make it better, right? We can make that better by removing the IQR, and we'll actually do a top 3 by max IQR. Once that top 3 by max IQR is applied, again, it gets rid of more of that noise inside that information, inside that data, and it really only shows the real things that need to be acted on. So going beyond this a little bit, what we're going to do is show you guys another good use case for Wavefront, right? So I'm sure you guys are seeing the trend here. The trend is how do we monitor multiple systems, this world of fragmentation and containers, and kind of intelligently and efficiently ask questions and see things before they happen, or at least before the customer sees them, right? So in this particular use case, what's happened is you'll notice this little blue dot down here. We can actually plot events. So this event says, hey, we have a code deploy at this moment. Now, if you notice, everything up to this blue dot looks about the same, but we see an overall uptick in CPU usage on our system after the code deploy. So let's go ahead and take a look at what exactly is happening. Can we clean this up a little bit? We definitely can. By the way, guys, this is what the query language looks like. It's again, it's not going to be a SQL type language that some people shy away from. It's going to be more JavaScript like. We're actually going to get rid of this so I can show you guys what the query builder looks like, something that the more business-minded people might use. So by just entering in what metric we're looking for, we can add in a filter value and hit enter, and we'll be immediately presented with that exact same scenario. And for whatever reason, if that query needs to be shared with somebody else on the team, it is going to be presented to you down below. Now, going back to the kind of the point of this use case, how do we clean up this information? How do we make sure our eyes aren't deceiving us? Well, let's apply some more functions here. We're going to aggregate this and actually average all of those series down into one series. Now, let me remove that function one more time so I can show you what we did. I have all of this information, hundreds and thousands of data points that are being stored on our platform and presented right there to you guys. The Wavefront is very, very intelligent and very, very fast. So by using this, we can come over here, take all of that information and aggregate it all down to a single series instantaneously. So our assumption is right. What we have is everything here seems to be the baseline, and we have some performance issues after our code push. So what we would do in this situation is probably take the short link, hand it over to QA or engineering and say, hey guys, we have some issues. We need you to take a look at this. Well, if anybody's ever come to anybody on the phone with an issue, the first question you probably ask them is this expected behavior? What did it look like yesterday? If it's not reproducible, then it's not science, right? So how do we prove our point? We prove our point by actually copying out this query, and let's go ahead and apply a different function to it. So we'll keep our average, and we will add a moving window of delay. You'll notice as I'm clicking through here, we do have a number of different functions that we can use. Lag, I'm sorry. Lag essentially means apply in the last 10 minutes or the last day, which is what we're going to do here. So let's say in the last 24 hours. What does this look like? So now what we're presented with are two different series that is yesterday versus today. And we have our point on the chart, which is our code deploy. And we can most definitely now take our short link, bring it over into Jira, put it in that ticket and say, yes, guys, take a look. It's definitely an issue. Please look here. So that is Wavefront's query language. It's going to be our dashboarding as well as a few use cases, one of which being real world. The last thing I really wanted to end on here is our integrations page and how to get started, right? So I had mentioned earlier that we're very developer friendly. We have a number of different community driven integrations as well as internal integrations. So when you get started on your free trial, you can actually come over here and see all of these different integrations. Now we are continuously integrating into the platform. So we're usually pushing new things about once a month, sometimes sooner, sometimes later, but once a month seems to be the sweet spot that we're adding new integrations in here. So a few I wanted to point out here are going to be the Linux host, OS X, Windows, AWS, as well as your data stores and the Slack, PagerDuty, VectorOps. So how do you get started? How difficult is this to install and get up and going? Well, for example, we'll use Linux host. It's actually really slick, guys. So what we'll have on each one of these integrations is the ability to see an overview with the README. What should it look like? What does this do? Now on Linux host, as well as a number of others, we have usually have simple one-liners or very detailed instructions. So we can come over here if we spin up a new VM for Linux or OS X. This is a single one-liner command. We'll copy that, paste it into a terminal. Within 5 minutes, it's going to install Python, pip, Wavefront proxy. It's going to have your API key already in there, and it's going to be ready to go. It'll even add it into your systemd, start everything up for you. And within 5 minutes, usually, you're going to start seeing metrics flowing right in here in this tab. We even go a step further to make sure that getting started is a simple and easy process for you guys. You'll notice we have a dashboards tab over here. If we go ahead and click this dashboards tab, a lot of these integrations, specifically Linux and the OS X and Windows, we're going to have a bunch of default dashboards. So once you guys get metrics flowing in, we can come over here and install the dashboard and see what we have and get you guys up and running. Another point that I wanted to make sure that you guys saw, I had said AWS, and everybody seems to be using AWS lately, is a real world AWS example, which is this dashboard here. So using the same tools that I kind of made you guys familiar with at the very beginning with the initial dashboard, we can come over here on overall. We can see a few instant successes, some system successes. We can see what's going on the disk read, CPU utilization. We can even see some IOPS on our storage. Let's go ahead and jump straight to instant storage. It's going to give me my disk read and ops per second. And then we could even have some network statistics right here for us to go through. So with that, guys, I'm going to open it back up for some Q&A from everybody. And Caroline, I don't see the chat window, so if you could help guide those questions. Is there a way to build my own integration? Yes, so there is. It's pretty simple. We have a GitHub account that we can send out, and I believe that question was from Rick, it looked like. I've actually been working on a few integrations myself, and I can send out your some details to you specifically or the group afterwards. We have another question that says, do we have a Kubernetes example to show? I don't have a Kubernetes example ready to show offhand, but we do have a Kubernetes integration. I can take your info and maybe we can do a one-on-one session this week or next. Is there a tutorial for query building? There absolutely is documentation for the query building. It's very robust and mature. And I think we're going to send out a URL for the recording today. So I'll make sure to send out that resource along with it. How long does it take to visualize an alert on containers when they're spun up? Seconds, minutes? Usually we have the data coming in within 5 minutes, but you can really adjust how much data you're sending in, whether it be in 5-second intervals. I think I could be wrong here. 30-second intervals is the default. Let's see. What does it take to spin up my own demo? Guys, it's really, really simple. If you get started on the free trials, you can actually see some default dashboards right out of the gate to play with. For me, in particular, if you're asking if I can be ready for a demo for you, not very long at all. I mean, it took me all of 30 seconds to just open my tabs and go to the URLs. So the question about AWS Lambda functions, I do know that we can use Lambda functions. Does it monitor AWS Lambda functions? I'll have to get back to you on that. And how much is the overhead? So the overhead is minimal, to say the least. On each system that you guys want to collect data off of, you're going to install an agent, and then you're going to have one proxy. Generally, that proxy I actually have running in my home on a Raspberry Pi to give you guys an idea of how little of resources it really takes. I'll have to get more specific details for you if you're wanting specific on that. Are there any machine learning or AI algorithms built into the dashboard? You can certainly write your own queries to exploit any algorithms or formulas for the queries there. Are there any offhand? I don't know off the top of my head. I will definitely have to get back to you. All really good questions, guys. Please keep them coming. What is the max amount of dimensions you can aggregate across? I've not run into very many limits. I mean, because our platform is out there in the cloud, we spin up resources as needed. So it typically power behind driving the amount of aggregations you can have shouldn't be an issue. But again, that's not something I know off the top of my head. Can we push alerts to service now? I know we've worked with ServiceNow.
We do have that integration. Yep.
We do have ServiceNow. I was just double checking there. So let's see here. What is the max length of time you can monitor against for time series data? We don't age data, so you can go as far back as you want. Obviously, you can if you add more data, it's going to have a little bit of an impact on return time on that, but we don't age the data that we store for you. How much performance overhead is imposed by agents? Again, I mentioned this earlier. It's minimal. I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head. And can we collect metrics on Skype for Business? We can collect metrics on literally anything if you can format it into a time series format. So we have a format that's a timestamp, the source name. It's literally the timestamp, the space, the source name, space, the metric, space, additional details that you would add in there. So what it's coming from really shouldn't be an issue. You can even, I can show you how to write a Python script to massage that data into the format that we need. What if you want to set up the trial to present this to your peers and managers? I don't see why not. Like I said, the trial it should have some standard content for you to look at, or if you want, I'd be more than happy to assist in any demos for showing this to your peers and managers as well. I know I'm not sharing my screen anymore, but it's wavefront.com/sign-up. So I will type that in the chat box here in a bit. All right, guys, I think our time is about up and questions seem to be slowing down a little bit. So anything that's been unanswered, I will take offline and try to reach out to you directly. I believe Caroline has a list of the attendees and your contact information. And one quick question was, can I see how much data you are ingesting? Yes, we have a way to view how many points you're bringing in per second. So Caroline, with that, I will pass it back to you and go on mute.